Hi guys, welcome back to Matt Chat. This is episode number 17, which covers one of the best computer role-playing games of all time, Ultima VII, The Black Gate. There's really no doubt in my mind that The Black Gate, Ultima VII, is one of the most important, not just computer role-playing games, but important computer games, period. This game, which was released in 1992 for DOS, is just a staggeringly ambitious game. The creators, Warren Spector and Richard Garriott, had a history, particularly Garriott, of amazing coding practices, but also just the concepts. Richard Garriott's acclaimed and later Ultima series, each of these games had been hugely successful for not just for Garriott, but for the industry. These were games that were, of course, inspired by TSR's Dungeons and Dragons, a tabletop game. And Garriott was one of the very first game designers to start working on this problem of how do you adapt the tabletop game Dungeons and Dragons, which is, if you've ever seen or played, it's a very social game with lots of talking and dice rolling. How do you adapt something like that? It's very complicated if you really think about it. How do you adapt that into something that can be run on a computer? And there had been other approaches, of course. Some people argue that the early text adventures were sort of an approach to that question. But what Garriott and what would later become the computer role-playing game developers community, what they wanted to do was take mostly the quantitative aspects of these games. So the numbers, the dice, the random stuff. But Garriott never stopped there. He always wanted to find ways to bring in more story, bring in more characters, create a virtual world that was just as alive as anything that a good dungeon master could cook up. This game, probably the biggest and most important innovation that it introduced was a huge and vibrant virtual world. This was a world that seemed more alive and realistic than pretty much anything gamers had seen before. This was a world where you could go into a village, and depending on what time of day it was, the villagers would either be sleeping, having breakfast or dinner, or out working in the fields. Day and night cycle, just like it does in the real world. There were storms that would pass around. This was a very realistic and coherent world. And even more exciting was how interactive this was. This wasn't just all eye candy. If you saw a cow, you could milk the cow. If you came across some flour and some water, you could make dough and stick it in the oven and then bake yourself some bread. I mean, this... wow. It's hard to believe we're talking about something that came out in the early 90s. Now, of course... we'll get into the game here in a minute, but it's important to realize, I think, that Richard Garriott and the Ultima series are just very important and influential games. And really, if you're serious about game history, you should become familiar with all of them. Each in its own way was the next step to the games industry as we know it today. Before we play Ultima VII, a little about me. My name is Matt Barton. I am the author of Dungeons and Desktops, a book about computer role-playing games, like Ultima VII, and a co-author of Vintage Games, which takes a broader look at games of all types and from all eras, games that we consider to be important. All right, then, without further ado, let's play The Black Gate.
Avatar! Know that Britannia has entered into a new age of enlightenment. Know that the time has finally come for the one true Lord of Britannia to take his place at the head of his people. Under my guidance, Britannia...
As you can probably already tell, Ultima VII is not going to be, your typical role-playing game. Already at the very beginning, literally in our face, is the Guardian, who is your arch nemesis in the game. Most role-playing games, the enemy is some wizard in some far-off dungeon or tower. You don't meet him until the very end of the game. Ultima VII, literally right at the beginning, he's in your face taunting you, and he will continue to taunt you throughout the game. Every now and then he'll laugh at you, make fun of you for making the wrong decision. He's always looking over your shoulder, and I think that adds a sort of a personal exigence to this game that you don't see in most other games. As with most Ultima games, the story here is fairly complex, and it continues a story arc that began in much earlier games. Without going into too much detail here, the player's character is called the Avatar, and he has been to this land of Britannia on several previous occasions, and basically saved the world. This time, as we'll see, he's not exactly sure why he's been summoned or who summoned him. That's one of the mysteries the player has to figure out. But it begins with a very sinister murder mystery involving gargoyles and the humans, and of course this mysterious guardian. But I should say, just overall, one of the most distinguishing features of the Ultima series is its focus on ethics and morals. These are deeper games than your typical computer role-playing game. Alright, so here we are, we're finally into the game, and already you should notice some very striking things about this interface. For one, where are the row of icons? Where are the windows? This is, I think, just a stroke of genius. What the team did here, there's nothing but the map. The whole screen is just one huge map, and you control the game very simply with the mouse, which was relatively new in 1992. So just innovation from the get-go. As you can see here, the Avatar already faces some potential problems. For one, he's been gone for 200 years. So it's somewhat miraculous that his friends and Lord British are still around, but there's some jokes about that in the manual. But basically, there has been a very grisly murder of a human and a gargoyle. And I should mention in a previous game, the Avatar got into a fight with the gargoyles, and the moral of that game ended up being don't judge a creature by its appearance. Just because these gargoyles look ferocious and evil, they in fact aren't evil. So that game had players confronting their prejudice. This game will go in all sorts of different directions. But certainly what was most new about this Ultima was the way that you move around. I just I can double click the right mouse button to move to a spot, or I can hold it down, and depending on how long that green arrow is how fast I'll move around. But I can move just about any object. If I want to move the horseshoe, I just click and drag it around. I can move the haystacks. I can examine things. I can put all sorts of different things in my inventory. This is a very interactive environment. It was amazing. Clearly it's just a crime that I don't have longer than 10 minutes to talk about this game, because it's so complex and sophisticated and innovative, and even after all this time, it still surprises me. I'm still amazed at all of the things they were able to put into this game. You have artificial intelligence for your party members. You have just a huge story, a big environment. A lot of people didn't even really follow the storyline. They got so involved in things like baking bread, they got sidetracked, and that's fine. It adds even more replay value to just an amazing game, a masterpiece of the early 90s. Most fans seem to consider this to be the ultimate single-player Ultima. Of course, Garriott would go on to create Ultima Online, which borrowed a lot of the innovations developed here. And that's all for this week's Match Chat. But remember, virtue is its own reward.